Thank you for joining us for the Barbados Today afternoon news for Monday, March 12. I am Mary Claire Williams. Our top story, Barbados Labour Party member Dale Marshall says the police should not be blamed for their interpretation of the Road Traffic Amendment Act. There was a huge outcry last week after police told a news conference that motorists would be breaching the law if they pulled over to use their mobile phones while remaining in their vehicle. But Transport and Works Minister Michael Lashley later sought to clarify the matter, saying drivers would not be penalized if they followed all the road safety traffic regulations. But Marshall, a former Attorney General, blames the Democratic Labour Party for passing what he says was a badly designed bill. And he told a BLP mass meeting in St. George last night that the Transport Minister was also in breach of the separation of powers doctrine of a democracy by interpreting a law that his own cabinet had passed.
Stanford was given a job to do and he did it. But the problem is that the law that the Democratic Labour Party enacted was an ambiguous law, because a driver is defined as including a person who is in charge of a stationary vehicle. That is what a driver is. So I can't blame Stanford. I'm a lawyer, and I can't blame Stanford. But I have a problem with how the government has dealt with it. And I want you to remember that Mayor Motley, Edmund Hinkson, and myself in Parliament said to them, hold on, don't rush with this law. You rush with two others, don't rush with this law. Let us take our time and get it right. Because there's nothing that promotes chaos more than a law that does not make any sense. So poor Stanford, as a police officer, was forced to deal with the law as it is written. And you then have a minister of government who is breaching something called the doctrine of separation of powers, who comes to the country and tell the country what the law means. Now, that is for the courts to do. The doctrine of separation of powers means that he is in the cabinet, he does cabinet work. Parliament does parliament work. The court does court work. It is not for a minister to tell the police how to interpret the law and how to apply it. But he came out and told the police how they have to apply the law.
Democratic Labour Party candidate for St. James Central, George Connolly, is promising to create 1,000 jobs for the unemployed and underemployed in his constituency. He was addressing the official opening of his constituency office on the weekend. Connolly said a number of people will be trained in IT skills.
We have several persons in that age group who are not at work. And we're creating a database now with all those persons who are either underemployed or unemployed. And with the IT background that I have and a cadre of peers, we are going to create jobs. Listen to me carefully. 1,000 persons we are going to train in IT skills. This is animation, this is coding, okay? This is building applications, and we're going to get them employed in industry, either here locally, working for international firms, or we're going to create new industry for them. It's not a lofty promise, people. I promise you, 1,000 new people.
He is also encouraging more people to seek employment in caring for the elderly.
In our research, we found that there is a great need for persons providing elderly care service. And right here, we're going to develop programs to train individuals in elderly care. And we've committed over the next 5 years to train at least 500 persons in that area and place them either locally or internationally, because there's a lot of demand for that across the world.
Prime Minister Frendel Stewart has broken his silence on the manner in which Parliament was dissolved. The life of Parliament automatically ended without the Prime Minister setting a date for general election last week. However, he told a joint branch meeting of the Democratic Labour Party at the Leicester Vaughan Secondary School last night that the move was deliberate.
It stands dissolved by the effluxion of time. I did not dissolve it deliberately. And of course, the experts have been giving expressions to their surprise. This is the first time in Barbados' history that a parliament was allowed to stand dissolved by effluxion of time. That is how history is made. History is not made by things happening the same way all the time. History is made by doing things differently. It makes no sense saying, this is the first time in the history of Barbados that there's a secondary school in St. Thomas named the Lester Vaughan Secondary School. That is how history is made. So the parliament stands dissolved. And we have 90 days within which to have a general election in this country. According to Section 36, I think it is, of the Representation of the People's Act, there has to be polling day, nomination day, and not fewer than 14 or not more than 21 days later, there has to be polling day. And I can assure you that all of that is going to happen.
One St. Michael family is now homeless after a fire at an abandoned property damaged their house. The incident occurred early this morning. The abandoned house is owned by Dudley Mayers, and he told Barbados Today that the house was damaged by Hurricane Thomas and it has been uninhabitable since.
St. Thomas, I get moved from out here.
Oh, so you were damaged?
Yeah, I was done by Thomas up to now, you understand me? So we cannot do no development out here until the government approve, come back and intervene. Okay. So they put us a house down in the bottom of KFL.
Meanwhile, DLP candidate for the area, Kim Tudor, and chairman of the National Assistance Board, Dr. David Durant, were present to provide assistance to the victims. Tudor lamented the lack of access for emergency vehicles in the area.
But the whole area needs to be looked at in a wider context in terms of accessibility. As you can see, this area is not the most accessible, but thank God for the quick response of the fire service. 2 tenders came and were able to respond and to save a part of Katrina's house from further damage. So therefore, the whole notion of accessibility and the roads and getting up here surveyed and more accessible is a long-term thing that we want to look at, because it could have been worse given how inaccessible the particular site is. So that's a long-term thing that I want to work on.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
In news from the region, Grenada's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell is reporting the discovery of a significant amount of oil and gas in his island's territorial waters. The announcement comes ahead of Tuesday's general election. Addressing the final rally last night, Mitchell said the Russian-based firm Global Petroleum Group has conducted the necessary exploration to locate oil and gas in the area. And finally, on the international scene, South Korea says the North's silence since the U.S. agreed to meet with Pyongyang is probably due to caution over organizing their stance on the talks. China's leader, meanwhile, today urged patience, saying Beijing is looking forward to smooth discussions. We get more in this Reuters report.
Pyongyang's been silent since Donald Trump agreed to talks with Kim Jong-un. Trump accepting Kim's invitation was a sudden surprise on Friday, but South Korean officials said Monday they haven't heard back from the North since.
I feel that they're approaching this matter with caution and they need time to organize their position.
Beyond North Korea's state media noting a visit by a South Korean diplomat within the North, there's been no coverage seen of Supreme Leader Kim's invitation to meet Trump, or for that matter, South Korean President Moon Jae-in. And details on the talks themselves are still scarce. There's no agreement yet on the location, what will be discussed, or even when exactly the talks will take place. Only that they'll happen before the end of May. The South Korean officials that briefed Trump in the White House last week have since flown to China and Japan to brief leaders there on upcoming talks. The next stop for one of them will be Russia.
That's news this afternoon. Remember, you can get more on our website, www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, and like us on Facebook. We're on Izumi Media in bus terminals and at Screenplay on supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also find us on Mix 96.9 FM. I am Marie Claire Williams. Good afternoon.